Okay, riddle me this. GTX 1060 or GTX 1080 Ti? 1280 cores or 3584 cores? 11 teraflops or 4 teraflops? Which is faster? Now the chances are, if you know anything about hardware, you instantly know which is faster. The chances are, if you've ever seen a number in your life before, you instantly know which is faster. So imagine being a site dedicated entirely to comparing graphics cards and still managing to get it wrong. Meet GPUBoss, the comparison site that has no idea what it's talking about. Now the 1060 versus 1080 Ti thing is perhaps a bit of an extreme example and a fun way to open the video, but we're barely scratching the surface of the train wreck that is GPUBoss. So let's dive in. Now the first thing you'll note is that only combinations with a GPUBoss review actually have a proper comparison, otherwise it'll just show the raw specifications, which is a pretty meaningless thing. In the reviews, the page is split into 3 main sections. I'm going to talk about each of these 3 sections, how they work, or more accurately how they don't, and why they're bad at giving the user useful information. The first section has the most important part, the scores, where they rate the cards in various categories out of 10. The scale here is very bizarre and will often put a much faster card only slightly ahead of a much slower one. My go-to example on this site is the abysmal GeForce 210, the card so bad that even when it launched back in 2009, Nvidia didn't think it deserved their entry-level GT branding. It gets a 5.5 out of 10 in the gaming department and a 5.2 out of 10 in graphics. Meanwhile, the almighty GTX 1080 scores a 9.8 for gaming but only a 6.8 for graphics. We all know which is faster, but the numbers would suggest that the 210 is more than half the speed, when in reality it's well beyond 50 times slower, or even 100 times depending on the test. I can only imagine that they use some sort of log scale on these ratings, but I can't work out why, because in the realm of graphics cards, performance is usually a linear thing. Assuming that there aren't any major bottlenecks, if I upgrade to a card twice as fast as my current one, it'll be reasonable to expect twice the frame rate in games. So I see it as incredibly misleading to not scale performance linearly, and to be honest, it defeats the point of a hardware comparison site. If someone was trying to decide which to get out of 2 cards, they could look about equal in GPUBoss, even if one of them actually holds a decent lead. Of course, that's only if it bothers to include a score in some categories in the first place. It also rates the cards on other factors such as compute, value, power efficiency, and noise. Without wanting to waste too much time, I think these are stupid and incorrect too. It rates the GeForce 210 as being slightly behind the modern GT 1030 in power efficiency, despite the fact that the 1030 offers 15 to 20 times the performance with identical power draw. After these scores, the site then gives the cards an overall rating out of 10 and then declares a winner. Amazingly, the choice of winner can be completely unrelated to all the previous information, making the site almost as self-contradictory as it is wrong. Impressive stuff. Even more infuriating is when it values one of the useless pieces of information too much for no reason and recommends you a rubbish card over a good one. Here's the GeForce 210 beating the R9 Fury X because of its noise and power. You can't make this up. The next section shows you the tech specs and lists them as reasons to consider a particular card. Now, these are all objective things that you can pull from a manufacturer's website, so for the most part they're at least correct. But it's still not a good reason to recommend one card over the other, because raw numbers alone aren't comparable between different generations and architectures. Here's an example. The notoriously toasty GTX 480 has less cores and lower clock speeds than the newer GTX 650 Ti. Based on that, you might expect it to be slower, and GPUBoss would certainly agree with that assessment. The only problem is it's not true. The 650 Ti is the slowest card out of all the ones listed here. Don't get me wrong, I'd rather put that in my PC than the thermonuclear bomb that is the GTX 480, but if we're comparing hardware, I'd like to know about performance. Okay, benchmarks sound like the sort of thing that's hard to get wrong. Surely these give a good idea of how different cards could perform? No, they managed to mess this up too. It has a lot of different programs in its benchmark suite, from synthetic stuff to a couple of games, but only a few will be available for each comparison. And needless to say, there's no mention of their test parameters or the system they use to benchmark. As a result, it's hard to know whether the answer you got was a good reflection of the card's performance or it might as well just be a random number. Between the GTX 970 and 1060, which I think you'll agree is a fairly reasonable selection to compare, the cards seem to take turns to destroy each other at various benchmarks. I don't know what to say, it's useless information. Why not have some games, or 3D Mark scores, or just something that gives us a good idea of how these cards compare? Oh look, they do have some games in order comparisons. Turns out the GTX 660 is narrowly faster than the 680. Definitely nothing fishy up there. Even the dreadful GeForce 210 seems to be a beast at playing Metro, managing to outpace the GTX 480 from earlier and even the R9 Fury X. People have been saying for a while that this site is biased against AMD cards, and I'd be inclined to agree if it wasn't for the fact that it's far too stupid to be malicious. Honestly, I could sit here all day showing you examples of how terrible this is, but let's be honest, I don't need to. Chances are, I'm already preaching to the choir, most of you will probably know to avoid this garbage already. But I felt like I had to say something about a site that frequently tops Google search results, and the only videos mentioning it on YouTube are people showing you how to use the site, unaware of its many flaws. It hurts to imagine how many people have made bad purchasing decisions because of terrible information on this site. The same goes for GPUBoss, by the way, which is pretty much just as broken, but updated less on top of that too. I'm gonna do a follow-up video soon comparing different hardware comparison sites and just how accurate they are with the graphics cards I actually own, so if that sounds interesting then maybe consider subscribing. Until then, I'm at least confident that whenever I need to explain the GPUBoss situation to warn others, I can just point to this video. Catch you later.